Hi everybody, welcome to this suggested solution video to task 2 of the Census problem, which is an A-level object-oriented programming exam level question. Okay, so task 2 asks us to consider the team class, and every team has an array of workers. So in task 1 we did design the worker class, and we can store up to 10 people in a team in this array. Okay, each team also has an ID. So our challenge is to design these methods. I've already got started. The team class takes an ID as a parameter, stores the ID, and sets up an empty array to store worker objects later. Okay, it creates an empty array. So that's what that line of code does. Next, get ID, classic accessor method. Next, get workers. This returns an array of worker objects. So we're simply going to return the array. Okay? The full array, everything. So that's what that does. Now let's go to get worker. It takes an ID as a parameter, and it returns a worker object. This is a full worker object with the same ID, or none if no worker with that ID is found. And of course we mean found in the array of workers. Okay, so let's design this class, this method, get worker. My approach to this is let's just see if this array is empty. If it's empty, we don't need to do any processing. So let's just check that. If len self.__workers, if the length of the array is greater than 0, that means we've got some data to process. So let's do the processing. We're going to loop through the array. For I in range len self.__workers, if self.__workers, which is the array, square brackets I, which is an individual worker object, and every individual worker has an ID, and we can grab that ID by calling this accessor method. Remember, this data is being defined in a different class. It's not in the team class, so we can't directly target these variables like we could here. Within the class, this method is manipulating its own class's variables. So we can just write that directly. If the data is in a different class, we need to use the methods, and we're going to use the getID method. So if that ID is the same as this parameter ID, we're simply going to return that worker. Self._workers, which is the array, and I, which is the worker that we found in the array. So we're returning the whole worker. Let's just come out of that. If we get to this line of code, it means we didn't find any worker, so we'd simply return none according to the specification. Okay, so have a think about the get worker solution there. Make sure you know how that works, and if you don't, go and find out. Let's move on. Def add worker, which takes a worker object as a parameter. It takes a worker as a parameter and adds it to the array as long as the array is not already full. So we're going to set up a parameter here, which will be a worker object. Let's do some logic here. If len self.__workers, which is our array, if the length of the array is less than 10, we can add somebody. Okay, that's the logic. So self.__workers, which is our array, this is the array, so we can use the append function and just simply add or append the worker to the array. Okay, so that's what add worker does. And the final one is get vacation number. It returns an integer. Count how many workers in the array are on vacation. So def get vacation number self. I don't think there are any parameters. We're simply going to set up a count, and let's use a logic that we've already seen in this video. Let's just check that there's some data in the array, or else we're just wasting our time. If len self.__workers, which is the array, is greater than 0, that means we have some data to process. So let's loop through the array. So we're going to loop through the whole array, and we're going to say if self.__workers I, so this is within the array that we're processing, this is an individual worker object, and we're going to get the vacation indicator. Now, because this data is being stored in a different object, being defined by a different class, we can't, and it's private, we can't target it directly, we need to go through a method. And here it is, get vacation indicator. So if the data in this object, this worker object, the vacation indicator is true, if it's true, we're going to increment the count. Okay. And when all of that's finished, we're simply going to return the count. Okay, so that's the get vacation number. Now what I'm going to do now is continue on to the main program. This is probably going to take another 7 or 8 minutes. So go and get a cup of coffee, pause this, take a break, come back, hit play, and when you're ready, let's look at the main program. Okay, in my main program, I've just constructed a few worker objects. We might need them later. Well, we will need them later. Now let's construct a team. Remember, a team just needs an ID. And in the background, we can't see it happening. But when we construct a team, we're also going to set up an invisible empty array. Okay, we won't see that, but we do need an ID. So I'm going to call it Team Max, the best team in town. Okay, so we've got Team Max there. Add workers to it. Okay, so T is our variable, which is allowing us to communicate with this team object. So let's call the team classes add worker method. And we're going to add W1, which is this worker here. And then we're going to add W2, and we're going to add W3. Now, to see if that's really worked, let's do this. Let's get all of the workers that are currently stored in this object, just to double check everything's working. So I'm going to call the getWorkers method, which returns the whole array. It returns everything. So now that we've got, this is now a reference to an array. Let's use that. Let's loop through it. And let's just print out the name of every worker in this array that's referencing the object's data. Okay, so we've pulled the data from the object into our main program. And using this variable, which is communicating now with that object data, we can loop through it and see what we've got. So let's run that and just see if everything is working as expected. No attribute add worker. What? What is going on? Add worker, capitals. Oh my goodness, you're kidding me. So everything's working. Brilliant. get a specific worker from the team object and make him or her visit 51 houses. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to call this assigned worker equals t dot get worker. And do you remember, with get worker, we just need to send in an ID. Hopefully we'll find the worker. So the ID that I'm looking for is WK201. Now we're going to send that worker. This is in the object, but we have a reference to it in our main program, so we can start playing with that object data. Lucky us. For I in range 51, because we're going to send him to visit 51 houses, assigned worker dot visit house. Okay, this is a single worker object, and every worker object has access to this visit house method that we looked at in task 1. So now that we've updated an object inside the array, which is in the team class, that's what we've just done. Let's do this again. Let's just get the current workers again and loop through and see what we've got. And let's not do get name, let's do get vacation indicator. Okay, get vacation indicator. And just compare them before we put this staff member to work and after we put that staff member to work. So let's just think about what we're doing here. We're creating a team, we're adding some workers, we're confirming that everything worked by pulling the data back into our main program and just looping through it and see what we've got. Then we're going to target a specific worker in the array, which is inside the team object, and we're just going to communicate with that in our main program variable here. I've called it assigned worker. So this references a worker object. We're then going to send that worker to work. Then let's just grab everything again. Let's get the full array, get workers. Let's get the full array back into our main program again and just loop through again and just see what we've got. So we should see false, 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 because no worker is on vacation yet. They've just been constructed. We sent one to work, the third one. So the get vacation indicator list should now be false, false, true, because the third one should be on vacation. So let's run that and see if it works. False, false, false. False, false, true. Have a good think about that, guys. That's tricky, but hopefully you can see what's going on with this example of object-oriented programming.